Right. So, in the last session, we discussed about microservices, what microservices is all about. At the same time, why microservices is required, in what way microservices is useful in present conditions. At the same time, we have discussed even about the difference between monolithic and microservices. Let me give you a clarity over microservice if you are comparing from monolithic again. Monolithic is a approach which is tightly coupled, where if you want to make any kind of changes in the existing components and all everything will be something difficult. Whereas when it comes to microservices, whatever the components we are going to develop, for every component, we are creating an exclusive microservices so that if there is any kind of change you want to make in a particular component because of the changes in the requirements, etc., which can be done easily. This is an advantage under microservices so that we don't require to do testing from the beginning. This is what something which normally the advantage of microservices we see. Now, today I'm going to discuss about what are the different styles of microservices we have. As we know, there are two different styles of microservices we have. One is about synchronous style and second is an asynchronous style of microservices. Two different styles. Generally, when it comes to the synchronous style of communication, as in we see, right? So whatever the HTTP listeners, such as any Tomcat or any JBoss, etc., are needed, but not messaging listener. When it comes to the uh, when it comes to the synchronous style itself is concerned, the major advantages we see, like whatever the messaging overheads and all everything won't be there. That is one advantage you see, right? So there will be no messaging server overheads. At the same time, whatever the errors we see will be propagated back to the caller immediately, so that whatever the confusion in context to the caller once they have sent the request and all everything will be of very lesser. This is an advantage when it comes to the synchronous style itself is concerned under microservices part. At the same time, when it comes to the disadvantages as in we see, right? So because when caller has to wait until the request has been processed, right? So this is one disadvantage, right? So when it leads to that, especially the waiting time will be more in context to this point, right? So when caller has to wait until the request has been approved, so the waiting time will be more. So there is a probability in context to the delay of implementation might be taken place. At the same time, adding hard dependencies which are tightly coupled between microservices, like for example, if there is any one service in the chain fails, then the entire service chain will also be failed. So that complexity will also be increased in this regard. So these are the disadvantages we could see in context to the synchronous style itself is concerned, comparing to the advantages under the styles of microservices. Now, when it comes to the asynchronous style, right? So when we talk about asynchronous style of services, which are majorly designed to accept the asynchronous messaging system as whatever the kind of input and as well as sending the responses for the others to continue. In context to that, whenever we talk about asynchronous style of communication, we see the major advantage is that whatever the microservices do they have and all everything have decoupled in nature. As already in the introduction, I told you, right? So these are all not tightly coupled. These are loosely coupled, decoupled, so that if there is any changes to be made, can be done without having any difficulty in context to the complete, right? It won't be affected in the whole application. So whenever it is required, so we can make the changes subsequently according to that. Next, one more advantage under is that high level of scalability. So because of the services which are independent, so if there is any kind of slowdown in one of the services and all, it will not be impacted on the entire entire chain of microservice components what we have, so that the existing application will be continued as usual without having any changes or without having any difficulties in between. Remaining application will go as usual. So this is also one of the advantages we can see when it comes to the asynchronous style itself is concerned. Next, when we talk about disadvantages and all, when it comes to the disadvantages, it has a dependency to the external messaging listener. That is one disadvantage we can see. At the same time, it is to an extent possible. I don't to say that to the full extent, but as to the extent possible, whatever the handling of asynchronous style will be complex to handle, because when it comes to the fault tolerance of messaging listener and all everything, it could be it will be complex in context to the messaging style itself is concerned, communication style is concerned, right? So these are the disadvantages to an extent under asynchronous style. So these are the two different things. These are the two major communication styles in context to the microservices we use, right? So while we are developing microservices for any of the application as far as the architecture itself is concerned. So if you have any questions, please go ahead.